Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. In Catholicism, they have monasteries. They have places where priests retire or spend their lives. They're called monks, and they are secluded from the world. And their interaction with the outside world is limited. And they do this because they believe that by creating an isolated environment that's removed from the normative everyday world, it's easier to bring yourself into a state where you can commune with the Creator, that you can come to know the Creator, that you can spend time with the Creator, that you can pray, where you are relieved of worldly anxiety and worldly troubles, worldly problems, worldly stress. Sufis don't have monasteries per se. They have places where they meet, but their attitude is very similar, often, if they take it seriously, to the attitude of monks who live in monasteries. They live within the world, but not of the world. There's a distinct separation in their lives. And this takes years to develop, but as you walk through the world, it's like you have a hazmat suit on. It can't affect you, or at least you've governed yourself, you've attuned yourself in such a way that the world doesn't affect you. So, what is at the core of the work that they're doing in a monastery, or the work that the Sufis do in the tarikats, or the people in any sect or religion try to do who want to contemplate with God? And there's a story about Moses where Moses said to Allah, he said, Allah, is there any specific act that I can do to make you satisfied with me? And Allah responded, no, there is no such thing. And then Moses prostrated on the ground, and he had revelation. And the revelation came to him that when he got to the point where he was satisfied with God, God would be satisfied with him. Now, this is a really deep and difficult understanding. To begin with, it explains the reciprocal nature of man and God. God is in man and man is in God. And as man is satisfied with God, God is satisfied with man. But what does it mean to be satisfied with God? What does it mean to be at a state of contentment, at a state where you no longer are whining, complaining about your situation? To understand this, we have to understand the nature of desire. It is said that it is desire that separates man from his creator. It's desire that separates man from God. And if you can be rid of desire, you can become at one with God. It's said that the distance between man and God is desire. So if we can come to the place of being content with God, it means we are content with our existence. It means that we no longer have desire that separates us from reality. We have come to the point where we have integrated ourselves with the truth of reality, which is God, and we no longer cling to the world and the illusory nature of the world. We have transferred that clinging to God and bypassed all of illusion. We've given up desire. We've given up the needs in this world. There's another story that talks about almost exactly the same point and ends up at the same place that the story about Moses ends up. And this is told by Umar. And he is talking about a time when the prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, asked for charity. And Umar came forward and offered half of everything he had. But then Abu Bakr came forward and said, I offer everything that I have. And the prophet asked him, well, who's going to support you and your family? And his response was, I rely on the prophet and my Lord to take care of us. So the transactions were made, and 3 days passed, and Abu Bakr didn't come into the presence of the prophet. And the prophet sent one of his companions to get Abu Bakr to find out what was going on, that he was no longer in the company of the prophet. And the man went to find Abu Bakr, and it was a walk of a little ways. And when he finally got there, he knocked on Abu Bakr's door and said to Abu Bakr, the prophet is asking for you. Why aren't you here? And Abu Bakr's response was that when the prophet asked for charity, I gave everything that I had. And all I was left with was a small piece of cloth to cover myself and a small piece of cloth for my wife to cover herself. Enough so that we could do prayers, but not enough so we could go out into public. And the companion that was sent to Abu Bakr said, well, the prophet is asking for you to come, so you better make arrangements to come now. So Abu Bakr went into his backyard and pulled the fronds from the palm trees, from the date trees, these long leaves that the palm trees have, and made a skirt out of them and began to walk to where the prophet was. In the interim, Gabriel came to the prophet and he said, I have a message for you to give Abu Bakr. And the prophet said, what is that? And he said, the Lord has told me to tell you to tell Abu Bakr that if he is content with his Lord is content with him. And the prophet said, surely I will give this message to Abu Bakr, but let me ask you a question. And he asked Gabriel the following question. He said, Gabriel, why are you dressed in a skirt of palm fronds? And Gabriel responded, not only am I dressed in a skirt of palm fronds, all of the angels in heaven are dressed in skirts of palm fronds. And then Gabriel went away and Abu Bakr came. And when Abu Bakr arrived in his skirt of palm fronds, the prophet said, I have a message for you from Gabriel. He said, the Lord told me to tell you that if you are content with your Lord is content with you. And Abu Bakr responded, surely I am content with my Lord. And he began to whirl. And that, by way of legend, is when the first Sema, the first whirling, occurred. But again, we have the situation where Allah says directly, if you are content with me, I am content with you, which is the same thing that was said to Musa. And what happened in Abu Bakr's journey to get that message? He gave everything away. He no longer had possession of anything. He was free of his worldly possessions. In Sufism and in many of the other religions, especially in monastic Catholicism, monks often take vows of poverty. And through poverty, they believe that they can get closer to reality because they don't have things and or the need for things to separate them from God. When you take a vow of poverty, you basically reject things. You reject desire. You reject becoming involved in desire. And again, that which separates us from God is our desire in this world. There's a story of a prince who came to a sheikh and studied with the sheikh, and things were explained to him about poverty and about relying on Allah alone. And so he decided one day to take his begging bowl and sit where the caravans passed and hold out his bowl and see if God would provide for him. So he went, he sat with his bowl, and people went by and dropped money into it. And he came back and he told his sheikh, look what I was able to do. I was able to sit, hold out my begging bowl, and people responded to me. And he said, well, that's very interesting. Now, why don't you dress as a beggar and try it again? Take away your fine raiments, your fine clothes, and do this again. And then when you get that money, use most of it on behalf of other people. Poverty and the understanding of poverty is a deep and profound understanding of the relationship between man and God. We are all impoverished without Allah's maintenance, sustenance, and protection. We are all impoverished without what it is that He has to give us. We have nothing on our own. For us to rise in our being, for us to become more and more of a true human, we have to imbibe Allah's qualities. Now, those qualities are His. They aren't ours, but He allows us to share in them. And this is one of the great gifts that Allah gives to humanity. It is said that Allah created man in His image. But what is His image, since Allah is without image, since Allah is formless? Well, His image are His qualities, His nature, the way He is. And for us to find reality, we have to understand the truth of that nature. And from whom is that available? It's only available from Allah, as Allah gives it to us. So we are impoverished, but Allah makes us wealthy. And what is the greatest wealth that we can have? The wealth of His qualities. What is the greatest treasure that we can have? The treasure of His qualities. But man confuses the treasure of this world, the illusory treasures of this world, the treasures that come from the earth and from the elements. He confuses those treasures with the true treasures that are eternal. The treasures of this world are all transitory. They all have time spans to them. They all come and they go, just as wealth comes and goes. But if you can obtain the true treasures of this world, if you can obtain Allah's treasures of mercy, compassion, the names in the Hasmal Husna, of kindness, of generosity, of gratitude, if you can obtain those treasures can't be taken from you because they are not elemental. No one can pull them out of you. No one can take them away from you. No one can steal them. So we need to find the treasures that are without form, that are eternal, that go beyond the time span that's allowed in this world, that exist forever. And it is within that we are able to become eternal. Without that, we are subject to all of the same transitory situations that everything in the world is subject to. We are subject to the comings and goings, to the life and death, to the appearing and disappearing. So we need to find that which doesn't disappear. There was once a king who had heard about a gem that if you could make it into a ring and you could wear it, it would do away with all of your sorrows, all of your troubles, all of your difficulties. And he sent his men around the world to find this ring. And they all went and asked about it, and no one could find it. And there was a sheikh in the area where the king was, and one of the men had gone to him and asked him if he knew anything about it. And he said, yes, I can actually produce that ring for you, and give me a few days. And he took a piece of inexpensive tin and he made a ring out of it. And in the ring, he carved, "This too shall pass." And when they gave the king the ring to the king understood how the sorrows go away. It's the nature of them that they go away. But if you hold on to them, they will not go away. So if you let things pass, you can become free. If you hold on to them, you are jailed and chained to your memories, to your thoughts of them. So you have to let everything go. We become enamored by all of our situations. We become enamored by all of our various dramas. We become enwrapped in those dramas, and we begin to believe that these dramas are our life, and there is no escape from these dramas. In truth, it is the escape from these dramas that begins our real life, that begins our life with reality. All of the elemental dramas that exist within this world are false. There is no eternity to them. There is no long-term prospect to them. They are all short-term solutions that we desire, that we think will give us happiness and joy. But in truth, the only things that can bring happiness and joy to us are the things that belong to Allah, the things that come from God. There was once a rich man who wanted to show his son poverty. He wanted to show his son how fortunate he was to be the son of a rich man, and he wanted him to be more grateful for that fact. So he sent him to a rural area that was outside of the grid of civilization. They had none of the comforts that the cities had. They were very, very far out in a rural area. And he had him stay there for a couple of months. And when he came back, when the son came back, the father began to talk to him about his experience. And he said, "Do you realize how fortunate you are now?" And he said, "Well, it's interesting. Here we have a pool. They have a stream. Here we have electric lights. They have the stars. Here we have a front yard. They have the entire horizon. Here we have computers and TV and technology. They have conversation. Here we have stress, and they have time." The son was able to see through the lies of modern civilization. The son was able to see through the manufactured reality to understand what actual reality was like. And each of us have to be able to do that for ourselves. We have to learn how to be content. And we have to learn how to be content within the circumstances within which we live. And while we're doing that, we have to learn to live within the world, but not be associated with the world, not let the world affect us so that we become magnetized to all of its pulls and all of its glitters and all of the different things that it offers. Our teacher often used to say to us that the problems that occur within our community come about because people bring things from the world into the community. The community needs to stay pure and free of all of the worldly situations. We need to be able to stay free of all of the worldly conflicts. We need to stay free of picking sides. We need to stay free of believing the entire subtext that is going on all the time in the media, in the various forms of electronic communication, in the various newspapers, in all of that which we are bombarded with by way of the modern technology that tries to impinge on our freedom by giving us points of view, by trying to push us in certain directions, and by leading us so that we conform to what it is they conform with. We should understand right away that the truth is not common within the world. The truth is very little known within the world. So all of the proselytizing that you hear in newspapers, on television, is not the truth. It has to do with worldly situations, with worldly points of views, and with worldly desires. People desire a certain point of view to run our government. People desire a certain point of view to get our votes. People desire us to look at things in certain ways so we can conform to the way that they look at things. This can create an overwhelming, complex drama that we can become involved in that will take all of our lives. We won't have room for anything else. It's like occupations that people become so involved with that there's no room for anything else in their lives other than their occupation. When I was in my late 20s, I was working in a law office and I had a question, and there was a senior partner who was about 78 years old. And I asked him the question, and he took me into the library, which had about 3,000 books in it, and pulled out a book, turned to a page, and there was the answer to the question. And I looked at him and I said, "That's a pretty good trick." And he said, "Yeah, it is. But this is where my life is. I don't know anything else. I'm trapped here. My mind is trapped here. When I'm with my children, I'm still here. When I'm with my wife, I'm still here. When I'm with my grandchildren, I'm still here. When I go to my place of worship, I'm still here. Don't become like me." Well, thank God I didn't. And it was very good advice that he gave me. And even though he was trapped, he realized he was trapped. And he was a kind enough man not to inflict his torture on others. And what happens in this world very often is people who are tortured pass on that same torture to their children and to their friends. Misery loves company. Well, he was miserable, but he didn't want to make other people miserable too. And may God reward him for his kindness in that aspect. We need to become content. We need to relieve ourselves of all of the pressures of the world. We need to become one-pointed in our concentration and understand that it is only when our hearts become full and we are satisfied that we can truly begin to make a connection with our Lord. When our hearts become full and we no longer are constantly chasing this world, that we can begin to find truth and find reality. We've all seen, if we've been in rural areas, I grew up in a rural area, and a common sight was dogs chasing the wheels of cars. And the question for me was always, what would happen when they finally caught him? Well, of course, they never caught him if the car kept going. But if the car stopped, what would happen? Nothing. There was no reward in attaining that which they were chasing. But the whole drama was wrapped up in the chase. And that's where man is. He's constantly chasing. And when the car stops, he chases the next one, just like the dog chases the next one. The fact that you're in the chase gives you excitement, gives you drama, gives you something to do, but does not necessarily bring about any kind of satisfaction. And there won't be satisfaction because we're chasing things that can't provide satisfaction. It's like the song, looking for love in all the wrong places. Well, we're looking for truth in all the wrong places. We're looking to be relieved in all the wrong places. We're looking to find transcendence in all the wrong places. We're looking to mollify our difficulties in all the wrong places. People are anxious. People have sorrows. People have suffering. So what do? They turn to doctors to try and help them. And what do doctors do? They give them mind-numbing medicines so that they don't think about it anymore and turn them into zombies. Mother's Little Helper, I don't remember the name of the drug. But anyway, drugs that compromise your thinking abilities and make you not worry anymore. We can't find relief in a bottle of alcohol. We can't find relief in various drugs. We have to find a connection to truth within ourselves. We have to find the reality in existence. And we can't believe that external worldly circumstances will resolve our situations. And this is what is constantly going on. We believe that if we can change the circumstances around us, we can change who we are internally. If we can change the environment around us, we can change our circumstances and we can change how we feel and who we are. The external circumstances are not going to create change for us. The only thing that will create change for us is an internal realization that to find truth, we have to find God's qualities, and we have to become content within our being. It's this being content within us as to whatever our external circumstances are that leads us to reality. You can put yourself in a controlled environment like monks do, and then monks worry about the size of the apple they're going to get for dinner, or who got the bigger orange, or who got the larger bowl of rice. It doesn't matter how petty or seemingly small the worry is, it's still the same worry. Think about a king and an entire kingdom, and think about a beggar who has 2 pennies. Do you think the beggar with 2 pennies is less worried about his 2 pennies than the king is worried about his entire kingdom? They both worry the same amount. Of course, we can look at it from outside and say, well, this doesn't compare to that. Well, it's not about what goes on in the outside. It's about what goes on in the inside of that person. And if that's all they have, and if they are worried about it, they worry. And then the next question is, what does Allah expect from the king? And what does Allah expect from the beggar with 2 pennies? Allah expects the 2 pennies from the beggar, and he expects the kingdom from the king. Allah expects everything from everybody. And when we are willing to give up our attachments to everything and anything, that is the point when we begin to make progress towards the truth and make progress towards reality. And until we get to that point, we are trapped in the drama, the emotion of our lives. We are trapped in the circumstances and all of the different scenarios that we're able to work out. And what happens is people fall in love with this drama. Why do you think people watch soap operas every day? And these soap operas go on for years. There are soap operas running in America that are 50 years old, and they still haven't concluded. Why? Because if they concluded, there's no more show and nobody would be making money off it anymore. Well, we fear that if we conclude our drama, there's no more life. But there is another life. There's a life of contentment. There's a life of joy that's available from understanding the truth, the reality of mercy and compassion. There's a life that begins to awaken when kindness and love are brought into our being. There's a life of love that is so transcendent that it's way beyond anything that we can gather within this world. But since these things can't be seen, since the eyes can't view them, we are reluctant to give them the worth that they are. We are reluctant to attribute to them their true nature. We are reluctant to say this is more important than that. But until we get to that point, and we say to ourselves with certitude and faith that God's qualities are more important to us than any treasure in this world, we are tied to illusion and tied to the fruits of illusion, which is to dissipate and to disappear and not to know the truth ever. So we have a choice to make. And the choice is simple. Either follow the path of the truth or follow the path of the world. And to follow the path of the truth, we have to give up the world. And we have to take a stand that we are with that which cannot be seen. Our faith is in that which is eternal. And we have to ask our Lord to do for us what is necessary to bring us to the point of understanding reality. God, make us content. God, let us understand what contentment is. Bring the truth into our being, Allah. Show us the straight path. Show us the straight way and release us from our attachments to everything that holds us back from you. Make us content, O Lord. Let us be in that place. Ameen. Ameen. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.